everybody, and welcome to One, the Brightmont Academy podcast. I'm your host, Griffin Rouse. Thank you so much for joining us. Today on the podcast, we are honored to have Derek Heinz, the director of Sammamish campus of Brightmont. We're really grateful to have you here, Derek. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks, Griffin. And good job of pronouncing Sammamish correctly.
Thank you. I'm probably going to butcher it at least once here, but hopefully I can stick to it.
It's fine.
So, Derek, we're going to talk for a little bit here for maybe the first half hour or so of the podcast, and then we're going to make some time to answer questions if anybody has any, and then we'll kind of just go from there. Before we get started, we want to tell you a little bit about Brightmont Academy's open house event. Every month, Brightmont opens their doors to prospective students and parents to explore their campuses, meet the dedicated staff, and see firsthand how the one-to-one instruction model helps students thrive. If your child needs a more personalized learning experience, this is the perfect opportunity to discover if Brightmont Academy is the right fit. Don't miss out. RSVP for a tour now at brightmontacademy.com and take the first step toward a brighter future. Again, my name is Griffin Rouse. I am an ADHD coach who specializes in emotional dysregulation. So I'm the guy you send your kid to when they're having meltdowns, they're putting holes in walls, they're screaming and yelling. Those are my favorite ones. So we do a lot to kind of help parents understand what's going on and try to shift their understanding a little bit as far as how to approach those situations and what's helpful and honestly what's oftentimes not helpful and what might exacerbate those situations. Derek, tell us a little bit about your background and kind of how you became the director of Sammamish Brightmont Academy.
Well, Griffin, I have a pretty varied background. I was a high school English language arts teacher for 15 years. Did a lot of coaching as well, soccer, basketball, mostly. Still actually do that here and there. Was a high school assistant principal, and then also have been in administration in both elementary and middle school. Came here just about 5 years ago, and just looking for something different. I like a challenge, and the challenge was growing this school that I think just has all kinds of just good features to offer families and students. And we've grown tremendously to the point now that we have 2 campuses across a parking lot. We needed more space, and the only space we could find was literally across our parking lot. So just have really enjoyed the ride, building the school to be what I envisioned when I came aboard, and just looking forward from here.
You know, Derek, we were talking before we got on here, but I think that anybody who is working with middle school students really has to love a challenge because that is a difficult demographic to work with. I think we were talking earlier. I don't think many people would choose to go back to their middle school years. It's a pretty difficult time for everybody. I'd imagine that the teachers are also experiencing that as well.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit, you said that you've grown tremendously. Tell me kind of how have you gone about doing that? That seems to be a theme when I talk to the different directors that there is this sort of this desire and this incredible ability to grow Brightmont Academy and to grow their individual campuses. How have you done that over in Sammamish?
I can't say that there's been just one clear recipe for this. From the get-go, I focused on culture and climate. I wanted and have continued to focus on making our school as safe and fun and accepting a campus as possible. So I think that has been paramount. We've had a lot of great referrals, a lot of word of mouth. A lot of our families have referred other families. I get to know the kids, our teacher. I really am very deliberate about who I hire to be teachers, and also to support our whole staff as far as our administrative assistants. And I hire people with a lot of energy, big hearts. I pride myself in being able to coach teachers into being as effective as possible in their instruction and definitely in their support of kids. And I've had the good fortune of being able to hire a lot of great people. We have some of the best people on our staff that I've ever worked with. So
That's fantastic.
from there, I think it's just been well, and then you couple that with the fact that since COVID, I think the world has come to
Yeah.
recognize that there's so many different ways to do education, and people
Yeah.
are looking for alternative paths.
So what would you say is kind of your main focus for the school as you go forward in this role?
Yeah, boy, that can shift by the day, really. But right now, it's just continuing to get the word out. I've been working closely with a lot of our neuropsychologists in the area. That's been fun because I found them to be really dedicated, and I mean, everyone I like to think is dedicated in their work, but they love to help kids. And as soon as they have a diagnosis, often they'll refer families our way. And then, of course, I return the favor when families are concerned about, whether their kid needs a diagnosis. So
Hmm.
it's a real symbiotic relationship. But um, yeah, I just, like I said, getting the word out. We have so many different, I hate to say types because it makes it sound like I'm really categorizing, but there are so many different types of kid at Brightmont. A lot of people are surprised that we have a lot of kids who come here full time and then are playing varsity sports at their respective public
Hmm.
schools. I think we've talked about that earlier. And we have kids who are really passionate about other things. For example, one kid who graduated a few years ago is an aspiring Formula One racer and grew up doing the karting circuit and had a simulator at home. And he told me all about, how he navigates a track and where he pump the brakes. And so just really every type of kid imaginable. And we come to really enjoy them all. And we're small enough that we get to know them all.
Derek, we're talking about kind of the different types of families and students that come into Brightmont. Are you seeing a change in that over the last few years, given COVID, given this sort of openness to new and different types of education? And what would you say is bringing people into Brightmont for your campus specifically?
Yeah, that's a great question. Boy, again, I go back to we have every type of kid here. My daughter's I just dropped her off at college a few weeks ago, but she was struggling with Spanish for a minute in high school, so she came here and tutored, and then she also got some help with her calculus class tutoring and loved it. And um, when she came here for that help, she was kind of surprised by all the different kids she encountered, and she said, "You really do have." All kinds of kids. I think she thought that we were exclusively a school that worked with neurodivergent kids, where, I think like any school, there's a definite I think we're a pretty good microcosm of any school. We're smaller in
Hmm.
enrollment, but we truly do have every type of kid. And the change we've seen a lot of hybrid. Well, that's what we've come to refer to as our the students who are taking some classes with us and then still some other classes in a traditional school setting, whether it be public or private. So,
Hmm.
and it's interesting because some of them may come to us to take their favorite classes because they want to really enjoy them one-on-one with a preferred teacher. Although the majority of them are coming to us for their most challenging classes. Another
Right.
thing we've come to see is kids who want to really dive into their hardest subjects over the summer.
Uh-huh.
Uh, and we've had kids who've taken a whole year's worth of, say, math. That seems to be the subject most will
Yeah.
will take during the summer, so as
Yeah.
not to have to do it during their school year.
Hmm.
But those are probably the biggest growing populations.
You've
And
mentioned a few times.
also the dedicated athlete.
So you've mentioned a few times that there's microcosm, and you have a lot of different types of students. That you're a microcosm of the sort of the larger school systems. One of the challenges in a lot of the schools is sort of the social dynamics. You have a lot of different types of kids interacting together, and that can be a bit of a challenge, especially when they're in middle school. But tell me a little bit. It's a smaller school, it's a smaller environment. How do you handle those social dynamics when you have such different types of kids in the same area, in the same sort of setting?
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked that. When I started at Brightmont, like I said, almost 5 years ago, we were very small. I think we had maybe 12 full-time students. And when parents would consider enrolling with us, they'd often ask about socialization, opportunities for kids to get to know other kids. And I used to recommend, coming to us, do your 3 to 4 hours of school a day, and then, take some other courses. Maybe, go do a guitar course with some other kids, or an acting class or something. But it's I don't do that anymore. We have one of the advantages, as you mentioned, we're small, but we're so small that these kids are they're it's fairly crowded for a small space, but the kids just all, like kids do, they just gravitate towards one another. We just, for a lot of our kids, their school year just started here within the last few weeks, and they're
Hmm.
already just at lunchtime all together. They found their peers, and that's one of the things that I enjoy watching most is how these kids all just find one another. And the other thing is we're K-12,
Uh-huh.
but our younger kids love our high school kids, and we have some of the
Sure.
sweetest high school and middle school kids for that matter. But it's they just it's crazy how familial it feels sometimes. So we've never, I'm going to knock on wood, but we've never had any issues with kids, pushing each other's buttons. Not any big issues anyway. Obviously, when you have kids together in
Yeah.
close, you're gonna have some
A little
little
button pushing.
here and
Yeah.
there. But yeah, no, I that's one thing I really love is how our older high school students mentor without me having to, say anything to make it happen. They just naturally work so well with our younger kids.
And so you've been at Sammamish now for a little bit of time. So tell me, what's the biggest change you've seen when you're sort of on campus and in that environment?
Hmm. Yeah, I go back to the different kinds of students who've looked to us and for the various different reasons. I tell parents when I can almost script the questions they're going to ask me when they come in for a tour because I've heard them so often. But people come to us mostly for one of two reasons. Uh, First is the just the one-on-one format of being able to find a really good fit teacher and learning the way they best can. And then the other most common reason is the flexibility of schedule. We can accommodate the needs of so many different types of students and their
Hmm.
families. The I would say the other biggest change has been that we're not. It used to be we had very few part-time students. It was pretty much full-time or tutoring or the skill building program, but we're getting so many of those who are coming in and filling some need or another by coming to us for 2 or 3 classes. So the hybrid kid again.
Yep. You've mentioned sort of the quality of the teachers and the staff and faculty at Brightmont, and I have a kid who attends a separate academy or a separate branch of Brightmont in Colorado, and I saw him on, I think it was a day or two ago, and he was telling me how he went in the morning. He was really upset. He had found out the night before that he wasn't allowed to be on the ski team anymore at the local high school because he had shifted over to Brightmont. And he said to me that the night before I went into Brightmont, I was madder than I've ever been in my life. The steam's coming out of my ears. I was out of my mind upset. He has ADHD and emotional dysregulation that comes with that. So there's some big feelings going on. And he walked in with a full head of steam, went to the director, started, just showing her how upset he was as well. And it's amazing. He said to me that she looked at me and said, "All right, then I guess we need to get you on that ski team, come hell or high water, and that's what we're going to do." He said, "Griffin, I love that woman. I don't think I've ever had a 16-year-old say to me that I love the director of my school in my entire life." I mean, it really speaks volumes about kind of what you all are doing and how you're meeting students where they're at in a way that just other places aren't able to do.
Yeah. Yeah,
It,
we have those moments. Well, that's one of the draws for me is I get the opportunity to get to know all the kids. You
mhm.
know, as they go through the registration or touring and then the registration process, I get to know their families real well. I ask a lot of questions about the student, usually of both the student and the parent, so that I can fit them with the right teacher. That's obviously very important in our format. A lot of the kids, I'm counselor and teacher.
Okay.
And I'll fill in if we have a teacher out sick and the campus director, aka principal. But for me, that's I tell people all the time, I relate better to kids than I do adults. So I love to have fun with them and get my kid fix every day. And my office is it's kind of a fishbowl. They walk in and it's just all a glass office. I
Hmm.
have almost no privacy, but then again, I get to wave to every kid as they come in and their parents often, and they'll usually drop by and say hi. And so that's rewarding.
So there, we've talked a little bit about how kind of in a post-COVID world, people are a little bit more open to kind of this different approach to education and different models for education. And Brightmont's not the only place that does one-to-one, right? I know there's a place called Fusion Academy. I think there might be a few others. What would you say for you is kind of the thing that separates Brightmont from some of those other one-to-one schools?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't where we are there. I know there's a Fusion, I believe downtown Seattle. I don't think
Hmm.
we compete with them very much at all. We're about 25 miles east in the suburbs. But just speaking to our format model, like I said, if anything, I strive to make our school the kind of school I would have wanted to be attending had I had the opportunity to be in a one-on-one school. I want the teachers to really enjoy working with me. I want them to feel like every day is a new day. If they melt down, you mentioned a meltdown before or have a difficult day. Our teachers know that we don't engage in power struggles. We learn uh, to notice the antecedent behaviors before a meltdown and
Hmm.
address it before it gets to that point. That's one thing I strive to coach our teachers on is de-escalation before it even comes close to escalation. Um, so yeah, I mean it's all about just making it a place that they feel safe and valued, I think.
So I want to come back to the de-escalation, but before we do, I want to make sure because I think this is a great question that we actually haven't talked about in the past with other directors. What do you all do to help subsidize the tuition? Because obviously Brightmont's a one-to-one school. It's pretty expensive and frankly out of reach for probably a lot of people who are looking to get help for their families. What do you all do to help subsidize that and make it more accessible to a wider swath of the population?
Yeah, well, some of them will access 529 funds. That's probably not the answer anyone wants to hear because that can be a little bit of a difficult pill to swallow. Most of our families can afford it. Where we live in a fairly affluent area. I will waive registration fees here and there if I have to, if I can do it. We sometimes will run those promotions. One thing I like to do is with our families who are taking on some courses, I will offer up free homework studio sessions where their kids can come in and it's kind of like a guided study type program, but I have a dedicated teacher there to work with them. While they're there, I might have our teachers work on some executive functions skills with the students, so they're getting a little bit of that as well.
Mhm.
Um, we've had students come in, and if I have a teacher available who had a canceled session or a missed session with a student, and they can come in and take some tests or just work with that teacher on the house when they're already getting paid for the session. So there's various ways I can help out.
Derek, you mentioned 529 funds. Forgive me, for those of us who are a little bit less well versed, can you elaborate on what are 529 funds? How do people access that? What does that look like?
I hope I got the number right. It's that program, and I know all too well because, like I said, my daughter just went to college, so I'm
Mhm.
using those now. But for those who have contributed to college funds,
Okay.
yeah, it's that
Okay.
program.
Okay. Um, so we talked a little bit earlier. You mentioned sort of that your staff kind of deals with a lot of neurodivergent students, and one of the for better or worse, one of the things that comes with neurodivergent students is oftentimes some pretty big emotions, some pretty big displays of emotions, and kind of needing to figure out how to de-escalate that. And I think one of the things that people really fail to understand is when a kid's having a meltdown, we talk a lot about how this is his behavior is if his or her behavior for that matter is affecting everybody else in the room, and they need to stop what they're doing. They need to get control of themselves. And I think it's kind of a misnomer in that individual is the one that is suffering. That individual is the one that is in pain, and unfortunately everybody else is kind of collateral damage almost. How do you approach those situations? How do you help de-escalate situations like that when you've got a kid who's really struggling and it is, for all intents and purposes, sort of having almost outer body experience? They don't have control of themselves in that moment.
Well, one advantage we have is if a student has gotten to the point of, escalation, meltdown, for lack of a better word, we're one-on-one. So they're with one teacher at a time in a office that is, not huge. It's a typical office size classroom, as we refer to them. So it's relatively private. And they have by that point, they usually have a very solid, trusting working relationship with that teacher. So there's a lot of trust that's been built up, and most often they can work through it themselves. If it gets to the point that they're unable to, then I like to be involved to help out, and then sometimes help the teacher to find different, better ways, or to talk through that with the teacher. We'll work closely with the families. Anytime a student has an episode like that, big emotions. In fact, I did exactly that yesterday with one of our families. We're in close communication, asking for any kind of input, feedback, suggestions they might provide. And as we continue to get to know the student and the family, that just becomes easier and easier. I mentioned antecedent behaviors and triggers earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And as we get to know a student, we are all the more likely to see those triggers and antecedent behaviors before we get to the point of escalation. So familiarity and empathy and compassion and connection, I think, are the keys.
You talked about antecedent behavior. Can you tell us a little bit more? I think that's not a term I've heard before. I've heard of what the maladaptive behaviors and things like that, but I haven't heard antecedent. Tell us a little more about what that means.
Yeah, I think it's just triggers. Well, a little bit different. Triggers are what cause the escalation, right, of
Mm-hmm.
feelings, of emotions. So for us, the antecedents are noticing what precedes a meltdown, or the path towards escalation. And that requires a level of understanding of the student, sometimes of their diagnoses, and their history, and and then doing the right thing by the kid, really.
I'm glad you mentioned that this what precedes the meltdown, because I think that's one of the biggest things that folks miss. They focus on the behavior, and we like to talk about this in a way that doesn't get fabricated from thin air. It's manifested by things that cause that behavior. And when we address behavior, it's almost like you're addressing swelling in the knee of someone who's torn their ACL. You can address the swelling, and that's really helpful. Don't get me wrong, but that swelling is going to come back because we haven't addressed what's causing the swelling. We haven't what's causing the behavior. You have a lot of teachers in schools that will try to redirect kids. Hey, come back to the classroom. Hey, come back and focus. And when that student is then diverts again and again and again, there's a rising level of frustration between the teacher and the student, or the parent and the student for that matter. And unfortunately, the redirection is not going to be very helpful very often, other than for a short-term immediate fix, because that student is escaping something. Something is happening that's causing them to seek to divert their attention. And oftentimes, if we don't address that, the behavior is going to continue. And unfortunately, what happens then is we get angry at the student. And a lot of times we get frustrated or upset. The student is, deliberately misbehaving now. And almost, you mentioned a power struggle almost begins to start now, because they're not doing what they're told, they're expected to do. And then that student starts blaming themselves. We get into a negative self-talk cycle, and things just really kind of spiral out of control for a lot of ADHD kids when we don't look at and talk about and address that sort of the cause of that behavior. What triggered that reaction? Have you noticed are there things at Brightmont with your kids that you guys have noticed that these are some of our more common triggers, or these are things that we see and sort of that?
Hmm. Oh, sorry. Did I cut you
I
off with my
no,
yawn?
I'm wondering if do you notice that there are any similarities or commonalities in the triggers for your students?
Yeah,
Because
yeah. I was sighing because that's a great question, and I was just um, pondering where to begin there. First of all, I just want to say one thing that I think is so much healthier in this one-to-one format. And granted, this one-to-one format isn't something you can do everywhere. Obviously, it's a model that is just not feasible everywhere across a world. But I wish it could be. But if you think about it, if a kid is on the road towards escalation in a traditional classroom, and I've been in this classroom as a teacher, it's very difficult to address it and finesse it in such a way that you can also do it privately and
Mhm.
honor the student's dignity.
Yep.
And they're aware, obviously, of all the eyes on them, and then sometimes, in
Yep.
some cases, they feel that they have to um, respond in a way that maintains their power. So those power struggles can be much harder to avoid. So in the one-to-one classroom, it's I'm amazed that we'll go literally months without any big, escalation like that. And it's just because I think the environment is just that much healthier and sterile.
You know,
Um,
it doesn't surprise me all that much, Derek. I'll tell you, the thing that I notice most with meltdowns and sort of the way it gets from I'm upset to I'm losing control of myself and I'm slamming doors or yelling and screaming is there is a coupling of a triggering event of some kind, but then there's also the second part that's almost always necessary or present, and that is that I feel completely alone and isolated. I feel powerless to solve the problem or the triggering event that has caused me to be this upset. And when you're in that one-to-one setting and your teachers have developed a really strong, meaningful relationship with your kids, it doesn't. I think it's great because I think that it gives you all the opportunity to really make sure that kid does not feel alone, does not feel isolated or powerless to resolve the situation that's causing them to be upset. And I think that's probably a huge part of how you all are able to avoid some of those bigger meltdowns, those bigger, more volatile moments. We had another question. I think it's a really good one. Can you talk about the cost? What does it cost to attend Brightmont? If I'm a parent of a high school or middle school student who's having a hard time in the traditional school environment, what does it cost for us to send our kid to Brightmont Sammamish campus?
well, boy, I wish I had the actual tuition costs right in front of me. I don't. I'm coming at you from home right now, but it's in the well, again, if you're looking at full-time school,
Hmm.
you're looking in the neighborhood, and now whether you're talking about elementary, middle school, or high school, it may vary a bit, but you're looking between 28 to $32,000 a year. Now, like I said, though, what a lot of our students do is they take courses with us on a part-time basis, so maybe two or three. In fact, I'm enrolling a student tomorrow. I just met with him and his dad today, who are looking at two courses with us, math and English, and possibly Spanish down the road. And then they're going to homeschool for the others. So the parents feel like, they feel qualified to work the other subjects, but would like for us to handle those two and possibly three. So it varies a lot, but full time, that's the ballpark, 28 to about 33.
Can you tell me, are you noticing that there is a need that you can satisfy that is currently going underutilized? Yeah,
Yeah. Oh, there's quite a few of those actually, and the word's getting out. That again, that's what I love about my job is the slowly seeing the referrals come in and the word spread. Uh, but yeah, I love the executive functions program. It's something that, well, what I make sure to tell parents when they come in considering that is, if your student really wants to improve in his or her study habits, learning about metacognition and how it can, an good solid understanding of metacognition can benefit them in their learning, or their organization, anything under that executive functions umbrella. If they want that, they're going to benefit a ton from the executive functions work they do. But I also tell them if your student's absolutely resistant to this,
yeah,
it still could work. If I get them with the right teacher, I can
yeah,
often get the buy-in. But that's a little bit more of a hit or miss type of scenario. But for the
yeah.
kids who are at least pretty interested to very interested, it can be so beneficial. And I think those middle school years are the best. Well, I mean, even kind of later elementary can be the best times to get started with that. But even the high school student who, is college bound, but could really benefit from some better organization, goal setting and tracking, any of the other stuff I mentioned, that can be a really cool program.
So you mentioned the executive function program a couple times. Tell me, as an ADHD coach, one of the things that we talk a lot to parents about is this idea that your kid has ADHD or you have ADHD, however it is, but there is an impairment that exists in your working memory and your prefrontal cortex. And similar to the way that my eyeballs are impaired and I need glasses to see distances, no matter how hard I squint, no matter how much you teach me to see the things in the distance, there's a limitation to what I'm going to be able to do because of the impairment in my eyes, because of the impairment in my working memory. Can you speak a little bit about kind of how you work with kids when it comes to this organization or time management? Because I think people talk about this stuff as though it is sort of the end all be all, and we kind of lose sight of the fact that organization, time management, these are outcomes, right? And if we're focusing on the process, we're going to get the right outcome more often than not. How do you work with folks when it comes to sort of executive functions and developing a process for them to get to that organization, to get to that time management place?
Yeah, boy, it varies a lot from kid to kid. We start off with quite a few surveys, work with those surveys with the student to get a good understanding of their history, of their where they feel they struggle, and oftentimes where a kid perceives that they really struggle or that they're doomed, they're not.
Mm-hmm.
There's some little tweak they can do. For example, and this is going to sound super simplistic, but we had a student recently who just decided that, well, his parents actually had required a real neutral, quiet space for him to study, and he needs music.
Yeah,
And
that is a lot.
he found that, that really stimulated him, and it was a certain type of music, and
Yep.
boy, it's something that the kids are listening to now. It's a sort of EDM type of thing, but
Uh-huh.
not. He shared it with me, and I kind of get it. It's kind of jazzy. And maybe it works for me too. And I always have music in my office to the point that when kids or even parents will come in, sometimes they'll have to ask me to turn it down. But it's just the way I operate, and I have to remember that it's not for everybody. But I mean, back to your question, it really does vary so much from one kid to the next. Like how we can talk about how to set goals, but for one kid, this particular way of going about it works real well, but for another kid, it might be a completely different type of system. So we find out what works best for them and how to continue to track and monitor and but it's so much more than all of that. Metacognition when I was a kid, I don't even know that it was a field of study, but
hmm
learning about how we learn is fascinating to me. I'll forever continue to study that.
That's one of the things we tell parents all the time is, I wish I had the answers for you, but unfortunately, every kid is so different. As a coach, ADHD coach, my job is to help your son or daughter go exploring in their brain because they have the answers. They know how they write a paper, how they get their math homework done. It's in there somewhere. We just got to go help them find it because there's just a lack of awareness. And I, it's funny you mentioned music and specific types of music. I've had this conversation probably 4 or 5 times in the last 2 weeks, actually, with parents and kids about how, no, actually, music actually may help him. Silence is actually not necessarily the best thing for your son or daughter. Well, I have one kid who's in college right now. He's funny. He only listens to Russian rap music when he takes exams because he can't know the words. If he can pick up the words to the song in any way, it'll distract him. And he doesn't speak Russian, so this is flawless for him. It works every time. The school was a little bit skeptical at first, but it has been an absolute godsend for this kid. It's been great to see.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
You also mentioned this idea that they have to want to be there, and I think that's a really important point. When we talk in coaching, we talk a lot about this idea that if they don't want to be here, we can't help them. Now, I think you also said, and I really like that you said this, that sometimes kids come to us and they don't really want to be here initially. I had one kid, I always ask, how much do you want to be here, 1 to 10? And he said, how much do I want to be here right now? How much do I want to be here right now? Screw mom. He had a more choice word than screw mom. But I was like, whoa, okay, that's so you don't want to be here right now. That's good to know. By the end of it, I asked him again, how much you want to be here right now, 1 to 10? And he said, I don't know, probably a 6.5 or a 7. You ask good questions. It's really amazing how when they start out, they don't want to be there. It's not going to work for them. That's the end of it. And then they spend time with a teacher that just really is invested in them and cares about what they're doing and how they're doing it. And it seems to really change things up a little bit for them. I want to make sure we get to this question because, again, these are really great. If you're coming from a traditional school and want to take 2 courses, how do you schedule the student alongside his normal full-time scheduling? How do you work with a normal school, a traditional school, to get their fit into Brightmont and attending the more traditional school?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Well, yeah, okay, so it's such a good question that I'm going to have to really back up here. Ideally, you would know that you are intending to do this before the school year starts. So ideally, you would reach out to the school counselor, registrar, and schedule such that the two, let's say it's English and math, that the student wanted to do with us, that they're scheduled at the beginning or end of the day so that you have time to then come to us and then we build that schedule for them. However, we do have plenty of kids who come to us, the year's begun, they're struggling, they've tried to
Mm-hmm.
get the help they need, tutoring, parents helping. Yeah, I don't know, a lot. I've tried to help my daughter often, with
Yeah.
mixed results.
Yeah.
So I know all too well how that goes. So then they're in a little bit of a dire situation, but the schools will usually work with them. And the schools, at least, our schools in our community have worked with us often enough, and some of them have sent their students here and even picked up the tuition for them to come to us if they can't meet the needs of the IEPs. So they know us well, and they'll work with me, and we make it happen. But it's not always easy. It's much easier if you are very proactive and do it before the school year or semester. So maybe they want to make the change at the semester. So yeah.
So going back to cost here briefly, Derek, it sounds like that sometimes anyway, the school system will pay for a kid to attend Brightmont if they don't feel, or if you're demonstrating they're not able to meet the needs of your particular child.
Well, yeah, that's a really, I don't know that I should have really touched on that because that's a much, I'm not really involved in that. That's a whole
Okay.
different dynamic where they've usually by that time, there's been litigation and everything. But
Okay. Okay.
yeah, it's all about meeting the needs of the IP, and the one-on-one format is
Mm-hmm.
often the best, easiest way to meet a student's needs per an IEP. But I only brought that up because it speaks to the fact that we formed good partnerships with the districts and the schools.
Yep.
So we're allies.
So you guys have been around for a little bit of time. You've grown. You've kind of crossed the street. You've sort of. how many, when your kids go to college, I think one of the number one things I hear from parents when they could talk about these one-to-one environments, how
Mm.
will my kid do when he leaves Brightmont and goes to college? Will he be able to be successful in a more traditional academic environment coming from that one-to-one environment? What have you all seen so far?
Yeah, that was one of my key questions when I started. We've had students with us since third grade who graduated with us. We just graduated one of those students last year. A student very special to me, and I often have wondered exactly that. They tend to do very well. One thing we can do in our setting is talk a lot with them about resilience and actually working to fortify that academic resilience. And they get to know their teachers so well. And another thing is our kids, by the time they leave us, are so comfortable working closely with adults. When you think that they're often in small, I mean, not small, but regular size offices that are our classrooms, one-on-one with an adult for 3 to 4 hours of their day, they're very comfortable with that. So um, the other thing is they know how to self-advocate because
Mhm.
anytime they're not understanding something, often our teacher can sense it because I work hard to make sure our teachers are asking the right questions and probing. But they will say, "Hey, I'm not quite getting this. Let's." So they understand that they really shouldn't move on in any unit, subject, in learning any new concept or skill until they have it down. So I think that's part of why they tend to do well. I mean, conventional wisdom would probably say if you've been doing this one-to-one all this
Yeah.
time, you go into college, that it should be too much of an adjustment. But for whatever reason, and I follow up with our students when they go to college and they do great.
I think that the comfortable talking with adults and self-advocacy, I think those are two really big ones when we see kids going off to college and parents always ask me, what would you recommend my kid do before he goes to college? What are the things that's going to make sure he's successful? And I usually almost, if you've got an ADHD kid, there are three things I'll tell you that if you do all three, I rarely see a kid struggle. The first one is talk to your professors. Let them know who you are. Let them know let you know who they are, and they know who you are. And not just in a brief basis, but truly get to know that professor and let them get to know you, because that makes all the difference in the world. The other thing is you mentioned that self-advocacy component. Being able to speak up when you don't understand something is a difficult thing to do if you've never learned how to do it. That's one of those things where for a lot of people, it kind of almost goes unsaid that this is a skill that you have to develop. It's something you have to learn how to do. And you have to get comfortable doing. Because, as you said, people don't like to leave their comfort zone. That's just an innate quality among people, and that's nothing wrong with that. But if you're going to be speaking up and reaching out and asking for help or going to office hours, you have to be comfortable taking that step and raising your hand or going to office hours and saying, "I don't know how to do this." And the third thing I'll say that we haven't really touched on yet, but I think is really important for ADHD kids, is don't try to do homework by yourself. It's
Hmm. Yeah.
amazing the impact of working with other people when you have ADHD. I hear a lot of killing, I want to learn how to do this by myself. And I always tell me, look, and I want to be an NBA basketball player, but that's not how you get your homework done. You do it with other people. That's
Yeah.
a strong suit for you. And you don't want to be running away from that. You want to be leaning into it. Find study groups, find people who are in your class who will do the work with you, set up meetings at the library. Don't go back to your dorm. Go to an environment. There are people who are working and do work next to them, with them. This is one of the reasons why parents helping kids with homework is sometimes effective, that they're able to just sit there next to them and just be a source of support, a source of questions or answers for questions if they need it. When you're functioning as kind of a safety net for the kid, it usually goes okay. When we start giving suggestions or telling what they should do, then we start to have the arguments come about and sort of the tension arise. So I think it's great that you guys have your kids are graduating and they are really comfortable talking to adults, comfortable reaching out for help, comfortable communicating when they need help and what that help looks like. And I think that's the other component. I hear a lot of kids will say, I need mom's help cleaning my room, or I need mom's help doing my math homework. And then she goes and tells them, okay, well, pick up this or, do that for your homework. And they get very upset and mom is very confused. He asked for my help. What am I supposed to do? And the issue arises when that's not what I meant by help, they'll tell you. Well, you
Yeah.
didn't clarify what you did mean, though. And being able to articulate that is such an invaluable skill.
Yeah, Griffin, two things came up. I'm glad you went down that track because one thing a student actually taught me, it was last spring, and he was studying for final. He had a few classes he was finishing up and some stressful, unit final tests or course final tests. And he asked if he had some downtime, classes were over, and he asked if he could just sit in my office. And he likes my music. So we had this, we got to playing this game where, not a game, I guess, but he would, ask me for an artist or band
Mhm.
and I'd recommend one. He'd go home and listen to him and give me some feedback. And then from there I'd see. So he's
Nice.
a
That's
huge
fun.
music lover too. But so he'd come into my office and just ask if he could be in there to study. And, I said, fine. And I was just answering emails like I do 90% of my day anyway. And he told me that his therapist had told him that this is helpful to him, and it's called body doubling. I'm sure a lot of people already
Yep.
know this. You
Yep.
probably do. I came to understand that that's something that's very beneficial for a lot of people, not just neurodivergent or ADHD people.
Yep.
And so just basically being in close proximity with someone else who's working,
Yep.
not necessarily working collaboratively or anything, but just being in the same
Yep.
space working.
Yep. It makes
He
a
didn't do that
huge
often.
difference.
Yeah, I
Yep.
found that I worked better too with him there.
Yeah.
So it's working well for me as well.
Yeah, it really body doubling was one of those things. It's one of the two or three things I can tell you is going to be helpful for pretty much every single kid who has ADHD. Now, how you body double, who you do it with, what the other person needs to be doing while you're working, that's always going to vary. I have one kid who it needs to be mom. The only person she wanted is mom at the kitchen counter. Anything else, or she can do it on Zoom as long as mom is also in the kitchen. For whatever reason, mom needs to be in the kitchen for her. That's what she does. For other kids, it couldn't matter less. The other thing that I'll tell you that is really helpful for every kid who has ADHD is verbally processing. Because you have that working memory impairment, problem solving in your head is a tremendously laborious thing when you have ADHD. They did a IQ or a study on ADHD kids and neurotypical kids with an IQ test, and ones who got the same score, they asked how hard was the exam, and the ADHD kids reported to be exponentially harder, despite getting the same score on this capacity exam as the neurotypical peers, because they had to do it in their heads. And
Yeah,
thinking inside of your head when you have ADHD is incredibly difficult. And so if you have an ADHD son or daughter, or you're ADHD yourself, being able
I
to
do.
talk out loud, being able to talk to people as you're going through your day, they actually have a study on software engineers who have rubber duckies on their desk, little, floating bathtub duckies that they will talk to throughout any given day. And that helps them think through problems, because when you're in these silos with your computer, it's very difficult to be able to really focus and get through these problems in your head. Most times, if you have an adult who has ADHD and you kind of videotape them in their office, you'll see their mouth moving under their breath, because it really helps to just talk out loud in order to think and to problem solve. So I think those are two things that are, just generally speaking, really helpful for people who have ADHD. And I'm glad that you guys are already doing body doubling and you're teaching kids to body double, and you're sort of, utilizing it as a tool for
In
kids,
this
because
case,
it's
kids are
so
teaching
important.
me.
Yeah. Well,
But no, I've since taught a lot of people.
yeah, it's so important and it's so valuable, and it doesn't come second nature. One of the things that I know I was told as a kid, and I think most people are my age are told as a kid, is you have to learn to do things on your own.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, that sends a really bad message for ADHD, and I think other neurodivergent kids as well, because you don't. What you need to learn is that you don't do hard, boring, ambiguous things on your own. Other people being in the room helps you get those things done. It levels your playing field dramatically. So I'm really glad you guys are doing that and working through that. We're starting to get close to the end here. We're going to start wrapping up, running out of time. Again, my name is Griffin Rouse. I'm an ADHD coach who works with people who are having, usually young adults and children, who are having pretty bad meltdowns and pretty bad bouts with emotional dysregulation. 'Cause, 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 ' Derek, can you quickly tell us a little bit about how to contact you or a Brightmont campus in their area if people think that Brightmont will be a good fit for them? I'm going to ask you one more question after this, but I want to make sure we get to this part.
Oh, yeah, yeah. The phone number is 425-836-1600. Again, 425-836-1600. Either of my two assistants will usually answer. They're incredible. I tell anyone who ever cares to know that my main assistant, Tracy, runs the show. She is constantly telling me what to prioritize, what to do, when to do it. She's also the every kid's second mom on our campus. So you're in good hands if you get Tracy on the phone. And Heather has been here just a few months, but she's already proven to be a great addition. Also, if you need to email me or would like to, my email is Derek, DEREK Heinz. Think of the ketchup. So it's HEINZ at brightmontacademy.com. So Derek.Heinz at brightmontacademy.com.
Now, Derek, I'm going to kind of put you on the spot here. Forgive me. We've had a few questions about pricing and kind of how people can access Brightmont, given that, I think the average income in the country is $35,000 a year, or maybe even less. And I think that, $28,000 to $32,000 is a hefty cost for a lot of folks. We talked also about this idea that Brightmont is growing, and you kind of have grown the campus a lot and grown the student diversity and impact. Is there a scholarship program in the future for Sammamish Brightmont Academy?
I haven't heard that there is. I would love for there to be, because I would love to reach as many kids and families as possible. But no, I have not heard of that as of late. So, and there was something else. You asked another question in there I was about to answer, and then I got sidetracked in my mind. What was it? I can't think of it. Dang.
Okay.
It's going to come to me as soon as we're finished, I'm sure.
All right. Right. Yeah. That's how it always goes.
I see. I needed music. That's the problem. Music going, that wouldn't have happened.
You need music, and that kid who was you're telling us about, who's body doubles with you.
Body doubling. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to start wrapping up. Thanks you everybody for watching. If we didn't get to your question, we will try to get to it next time we do this. We do this podcast every month with different guests. So tune in next month. We're going to be talking to a guy named Jeff Copper, who's got a whole new intervention for ADHD. I think you had it.
Yeah, I remembered. Remember what I was going to say, Griffin. One thing I hear from parents is they visit all the time, and then they ask about the tuition. I hear all the time that we're right in line with other private schools in the area, and actually usually on the less expensive side. So I've never even really researched what else is out there, mostly because what else is out there is usually not quite like what we do. So it's an apples oranges type of comparison. But parents who have done their research and are considering private schools of any kind usually don't bat an eyelash when they see our tuition.
No, I can speak to kind of having clients literally from Saudi Arabia to Spokane, Washington, and pretty much everywhere in between, that I would tell you that the average cost for a private school these days in the U.S. is somewhere between $40,000 and $50,000 a year. So yeah, when I first heard $28,000, I guess I had kind of dueling reactions. One is that's a lot of money. The other is that's actually not that much money relative to a lot of other schools that are out there. Okay. Unfortunately, the cost just keeps rising for these kinds of institutions, and that's going to be something we're hopefully going to be able to get addressed here in the future. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us, and hopefully we will see you again next month when we talk with Jeff Copper. Everyone have a great night.